miss out on my gubbins if they're a bit late. Welcome, everybody, to tonight's panel discussion on wellness and public benefit in archaeological practice. Just to explain a bit, my name is Chris Reed. I'm an Inspector of Ancient Monuments with Historic England. And I think we kind of settled on this topic in part because of my interest on it and just how much I think it actually is really relevant to today's practice and how we move forward as a body of practitioners. In part because I find myself struggling on a kind of daily basis in terms of trying to weigh the balancing exercise required to us in policy about public benefit and what can we do to enhance our work and really make it relevant, instead of being seen as sort of a stagnant body that kind of gets in the way. How can we really show what we can do to the world, to development, to the communities that we work with? So in part, this is also actually relevant because we had randomly something called an unconference recently in Historic England, and it's sort of suitable in the sense that what that was just coming together and having discussions around topics that we wanted to talk about, and that the theory behind it was that whatever happens is the right thing to happen. Whoever comes is the right people to come. So I'm trying to take that into this discourse today, in that, you know, we can really shape how we move today's discussion along. Obviously, we need to do an AGM at some point, which is not the fun bit, but we will cap it at about 7:30. So we have about an hour's time for the panel and the discussion, and then we'll do an AGM. I promise it will be quick and painless. People can leave at that point if they are not interested, but it shouldn't take too long. I promise. We have a few nominations and whatnot to get to, and then some networking, and inevitably we'll wind up at the pub, I'm sure. Thank you so much. I will make a quick introduction to our speakers. Oh, let me get Maiya up. Sorry, I don't want to. I said I'd pin her. 1 second, Maiya. I'm getting you up on our screen. Let's see if I can do this. Apologies, we've got a lot of tech going on, and I'm not sure. Oh, hang on, go hide the chat. Close the chat. Okay, there we go. Ooh, magic. Right. Okay, there. So you're now very large on our screens, which is amazing. So we'll start with you. So just a brief introduction, because I imagine, you know, you'll go into your work and whatnot yourselves, so I don't want to introduce you at broad length. So apologies, Maiya, your last name might befuddled me slightly. Maiya Pina-Dacier, sort of close, is the Director of Engagement at Digventures. And then moving along, we've got Alisdair Douglas, who is a senior archaeologist at PCA, and is representing his work here with Watero Uncovered. Moving along, we've got Sadie Watson, who is an archaeologist at MoLA, but here is sort of, I mean, you've got so many strings to your bow, but we'll say that you are the UKRI Future Leaders Fellow. That's a very long title, but essentially on public benefit and maximizing that in commercial practice. I believe coming to the end of that, but you'll tell us more about it for sure. Then we have Duncan, who's the project manager at the National Trust, and is specifically here to talk about the Heritage and Archaeology Ranger Team. I like that one more as an acronym. And Phil Emery and Diana Fitzwilliam next to him are both from the Canal and River Trust, singular, as I was corrected today. And both of them themselves and actually Maiya will be kind of talking about their project in relation to the Southall Wellbeing Way. I'm sure we'll expand on all of the work that you do with the Canal and Rivers Trust. So without further ado, perhaps we'll start in the room, Maiya, if you don't mind, and then we'll get to you as we go along. Maybe put you in between and put you before Phil. So Alisdair, would you like to give us a start? Right, I've been told you have to hold the mic vertically, no, or horizontally, not vertically, like this for best effect. And if any technological issues happen, we'll just go with the flow. So I will be timing you just so you don't ramble, but you know, no firm cutoff time. All right.
Good, thank you very much.
It needs to be
this one.
Yeah.
All right. So most of you in the room know me. I'm a professional archaeologist, but I'm talking to you tonight about Watero Uncovered, which is a charity that uses archaeology combined with a program of care and support for veterans and serving military personnel who are struggling to cope either physically or mentally with the impacts of their service. The charity was founded by Mark Evans and Lieutenant Colonel Charlie Fournette, who actually both went to UCL and did archaeology there, and then they both joined the army and they both joined the Coldstream Guards. They were in heavy fighting in Afghanistan, and when they came back in 2010, Mark was diagnosed with PTSD. He struggled with that for 2-3 years before he managed to deal with it. So that you know, PTSD doesn't disappear, it's always there, you just learn to manage it. In 2014, he formed Watero Uncovered with Charlie's support, and then they took a team to the battlefield of Waterloo in 2015. I've been involved with them since 2018 as a trench supervisor, and then again in 2019, 2021, 2022. So it's a 12-month program that the veterans and serving military personnel are on, and the highlight is the excavation for 2 weeks in Belgium. What Mark did, what was important was he realised firstly that only a little bit of archaeological work had ever been done on the battlefield, and secondly that by being part of a team working through the process of archaeology, it has the potential to help people in their recovery and in their transition. And what began as this very small-scale excavation in 2015 has grown enormously. And over the years, we've helped hundreds of military veterans and serving personnel, and we hopefully will continue to do so. For the veterans and serving military that take part in this program, and especially in the excavation, we provide a safe place where the participants are supported. We also, in the team, have professional archaeologists. The archaeological director is Professor Tony Pollard, and then we have a number of brilliant archaeologists come along, including Phil Harding, which is great. And the day-to-day team is led by Cornelius, which I guess some of you know. And then we also have students from Utrecht University, and we're other volunteers helping with logistics, with transport, with media, and so on. For some of the non-military people, it can be difficult. The conversations we have as military people can be difficult for other people. They don't understand necessarily a banter, a humour, neither do they understand what we've been through. So it's, I don't know why it works, but it does work. So to tell you about the archaeology, the battle was fought on the 18th of June, 1815. So it's one day. It's very rare in archaeology. You're looking at one day. We've done a lot of work at Hougoumont, which is on the right flank of the Allied line, which very famous. It's iconic for the Coldstream Guards. They fought at the holding out at this this farm, but we've proved that they weren't the only buggers there actually. So the Scots Guards were there as well, much to their annoyance. But anyway, they were, and we've done a lot of work on what we call the killing field, which was just in front of the garden, the walled garden, and you really understand the range that the fire is coming in. We plotted all of the musket balls. I mean, there's thousands of them. They're killing each other in like 20 meters. So we also worked at Mont Saint John, which is another farm, Belgian farm, this time to the rear of the Allied line, and it was Wellington's field hospital. It's where all the casualties ended up at. They did thousands of amputations in the few hours of that day, and they were just chucked into the cesspit and round about. We did excavate the cesspit in the middle of the farm. That's how Belgian farms work, but obviously that had been cleaned out many, many times, so there was nothing there. But we did find what we think is it was a trench. It was a linear trench. It was deliberately excavated just after the battlefield to put in battlefield clearance. And we found a few amputated limbs in 2019 and a lot of ammunition boxes. And then when we went back in 2022, we found some horses that had obviously been let in and they'd been popped, they'd been shot in the head. They must have been wounded or something. And then we would find a human skeleton that had been laid out. Finding human remains is very rare on the battlefield because after the battlefield, it was all swept up and most of the bodies were burnt or they were turned into fertilizer and spread on the fields of eastern England. A contractor got that job. Anyway, so we found this body that had been laid out. It was of all I can tell you, it was a young man, presumably a casualty. Whereas I've been involved with excavating hundreds of human skeletons, the Waterloo's very moving, but it's not the dead person, it's the living. So the Padre said something from the American Embassy. She was very good. Many of us broke down, but that's because we're experiencing something else, if you understand what I'm saying. Anyway, if I move on, all of this helps the process of recovery and transition. But we also involved with the archaeology, we use creative arts, we use model making, we do poetry, creative writing, painting, and we're using archaeology as a vehicle to do something, I think, more important and worthwhile. And what I learned was that it doesn't, we could apply this to other groups, other circumstances, and helping other people. We're building confidence and an ability to see the future where people can thrive and go on. Okay.
Thanks, Alisdair. It's obviously we'll come back to the discussion. So just everyone keep it in your mind. Sadie, would you like to go next?
I will, thank you. Yeah, and I'm going to start by saying that when I talk about public benefit and the things well-being led archaeology, I'm an archaeologist, and anything that I'm referencing or recommending that we do is not going to be done by me. It'll be done by medical professionals, psychiatrists, people that are trained in how to deal with people who need extra care and help. This isn't things that archaeologists can do, but we can facilitate it happening. That's the point that I'm talking. That's the framing that I'm going to talk about, rather than being the person that actually does the well-being led archaeology. And I think Watero Uncovered obviously have a huge team of medical experts and trained people to deal with the things that I was talking about, and that's a crucial part of all this stuff. But my own work is entirely, in a way, very similar, because I really respect the work that Watero Uncovered do, and their data sets, and they have proven that it works, and they have medical reports to show that it works, and we all read those reports, and they're really useful to prove that well-being does happen through archaeology. My own work is through development-led sector, and that obviously happens through planning. So the research that we've done has drawn up various issues with providing well-being through planning-led archaeology. One of the main things is the way that we're also confused about what public benefit is, to be honest. Lots of people in CIfA, people outside CIfA, are confused about the difference between public benefit and professional obligation as public benefit, because obviously the planning is a public service, because planning is a public sector funded thing, and lots of practitioners think that as we operate within that public system, we are providing public benefit. And of course, that's partly true. Dissemination and archiving is a public benefit. But lots of us, I think, would agree that we need to go beyond that. And so that's how I'm framing public benefit as I'm talking about it today. And it's good to see, of course, that lots of glass curators are increasingly using public benefit in planning conditions. So there'll be a mitigation on a condition for development, and also another one, and we're seeing them increasingly all across Greater London now, public benefit. And it's tricky for curators, clients, and contractors like me and PCA to work out what that exactly might mean, of course, and that's the trick that we're all trying to work out today. And I know that GLAS will be coming along with new guidance soon, which will help us inform those decisions and things. But I think a lot of innovation is needed in that area of our practice as well. So we have lots of digital innovation all the time, technology, digital recording, but really we're looking at sort of people-focused innovation, and that's an area that I think we're quite lacking in. But archaeology generally, particularly development-led archaeology, is really good at following other sectors, colleagues that we work with on site. So we're all experts in engineering terminology. We all know about piling, and we all know about shoring. We all know about various other things that I never thought I'd become an expert in, but we are. So we can borrow from other well-being areas. What works for well-being are a good example. They have set frameworks that other government bodies and other parts of the creative sector particularly follow. So we don't need to reinvent wheels. We just need to show how archaeology can respond to those well-being frameworks that already exist, really. And there are 5 things that the What Work Centre for Wellbeing say are the sort of main aims for wellbeing work. And they're really simple. It's give, I wrote them down because I'm not going to remember them. Give, be active, keep learning, connect, take notice. Archaeology responds to all of those really perfectly. I mean, they're really generic, quite wide. So you can aim archaeological practice at any stage. Field work is only one bit of archaeological practice, as we know. So finance work, artifact handling, archiving, DDA, everything can respond to all those things. But to get it in as a public benefit planning condition is a really tricky thing, and that's the next stage. So can well-being be a public benefit in a planning condition? And that's the challenge that we are partly setting ourselves, isn't it, I guess? And in order to get there, we need experts in planning. So Sandy is the man in the room who can tell us how to do that, hopefully. But no pressure, Sandy. But the NPPF has sustainable development defined as environmental, economic and social. So social is in there already. We just never use it as a way of providing sustainable development. We talk about other types of sustainable development, and archaeology rarely responds to the social aspect of that. And the London Plan has social wellbeing at the bottom of its bit about planning. So can planning respond to social wellbeing? And of course, archaeology can. but we don't lever that aspect of the London plan enough, if at all, really. So very quickly, because I don't want to go on about this, but I think crucially, the main thing about public benefit is that we don't ask the public how they might want to benefit from the work that we do. So there'll be a whole other layer of work, I think, that archaeologists projects will have to engage in, which is asking them at some stage what they want. It might be on a really local site specific level, or we could do it on a regional level for master planning, for example. I think master plans offer a huge opportunity for this sort of well-being through planning condition on a consultation basis, so that we can respond to their local research aims, and we can ask them how they'd like the information disseminated. I'm guessing they won't want a monograph published, but you never know. And we can ask about other things, so whether they want the archaeology reflected in the design, in other parts of the development in the end. And that's how I think we might get public benefit in as a well-being led bit of the condition.
Great, thank you so much, Sadie. That's brilliant. Again, just really interesting in terms of how the difference, I think, between kind of Alisdair's take on this topic and yours, I think, is going to provide some really interesting discussion moving forward. But let's move on now to Duncan Co, please. And he's going to remind the horizontal, not vertical thing. Probably useful, I think, for those back at home. There's not too many, but we've got a few. Yeah,
I will do my best. So yeah, it's kind of interesting in the context of this discussion that, you know, that National Trust, who I have to remind myself and everyone else in the room that I've only been with for a short while, only just over a year, it effectively exists to provide public benefit. You know, it's a charity. It's set out in statute. Its purposes are set out in statute. And you know, one of the current strap lines is forever for everyone. You know, we are here to provide access to and information about and etc. the history, nature, and landscapes. And we do that in a variety of ways. And the National Trust, you know, has done that, you know, for many, many, many years in a variety of ways. Recently, much to discuss a certain section of the right-wing media, you know, the Trust has made a real effort to be more inclusive, to broaden its audience, to seek to introduce new audiences to our heritage, which, to my perspective, is to be applauded for. So where does archaeology fit in all that? Where does archaeology work within the National Trust? Archaeology, at the moment, it's kind of set in two teams in the National Trust. There's a central team, which is where I sit, and I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing in a moment. And then we have teams, regional archaeologists who work in what we call our consultancy. Don't ask me why they call it consultancy, but they do. And they're there to provide support to the individual properties, who effectively are given the freedom to sort of make a lot of broad decisions about how they run their particular places and the priorities they put on their particular places. We've got a central database, and we've got something in the region of 95,000 records on that, growing all the time. I think it was under 90 when I started. It's just over a year, it's gone up over 5,000. As is the way with archaeological databases, they seem to be never ending in their growth. Of those, something in the region of about 2/3, something in the region of about 60,000, have a kind of conservation need of some description. So, you know, if you exclude all the find spots, all the places that have been destroyed through various activities, and you exclude the buildings, which we have a separate management and care process through our building surveyors, then you end up with around 60,000. Now, some of those are iconic: Fountains Abbey, Corfe Castle, Sutton Hoo. You know, some of the most iconic sites, including in the press today. I assume people have seen the press today about the Sycamore Gap and the loss of the tree there, which is slightly bizarre and slightly worrying. So, you know, we care for some of the most iconic archaeological sites and landscapes in the country. But if we're honest, we don't have the resources to really understand what's going on those sites on a day-to-day or even a year-to-year basis. And I think we recognise that, some of my colleagues recognised that a few years ago, that we, within the professional teams, we don't have the resources to be able to keep an eye on what's happening in our landscapes. And that's where the Heritage and Archaeology Ranger team, or HART for short, came from. Effectively, it's about using volunteers and recruiting people to come onto our land to do site condition survey monitoring, so that we can then understand what's happening out in the land. We can understand what the threats are, what the vulnerabilities are, and that allows us to make more informed decisions about what we need to do. It allows us to target the resources we have towards those places of greatest need. But the great thing about the HART initiative, and the reason why I'm really enthused about it, is that it actually allows us to bring a lot of new people in, a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise be engaged in these processes, gets them out in the countryside, gets them out looking at these places, gets them engaged with these places in a way that we probably weren't doing previously. And we've recruited several hundred, and we're in the process of growing that all the time. So we've got new groups starting on Hadrian's Wall, a new group that just started at Fountains Abbey and Studley Royal, a new group starting on the Lizard in Cornwall. So we're recruiting new groups all the time, new people coming in, new people who are going out, engaging with those landscapes, engaging with those places, and giving us absolutely fundamentally important information about what's happening out there, which allows us to make informed decisions and so on. So that's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm about, and I'll hand over now.
Thank you so much, Duncan. That's brilliant. It's a really good project. Perhaps actually we'll go jump online to Maiya first, shall we? Or do you guys want to do it in a different order? It's up to you. Don't mind. She can go last.
Up to you, Maiya.
I think Phil and Diana, you go first, and I'll jump in at
the end. All right, fine. Sounds good. All right.
Phil, yeah, so hard to follow the three individuals to my right, but anyway, just to explain, I'm the heritage advisor at the Canal and River Trust, a charity which formed in 2012, taking over the Inner Waterways legacy from British Waterways. And I joined there 7.5 years ago, following a career in archaeology 30 years long. And my involvement in archaeology began as a volunteer, which I think applies to a lot of people in my sort of vintage generation. As the Trust's only accredited archaeologist, I have no formal archaeological remit within the organisation. So I only advise on an opportunistic basis and when I'm explicitly requested so to do, which does make initiatives like the one we're talking about today quite difficult to bring about. That's something possibly that CIfA might want to look at for people like me embedded in organisations, professional archaeologists with no official remit. That I suspect there's quite a lot of people like me requiring a little bit of external support. Anyway, that's another question. Now, when the Trust was formed as a charity in 2012, again with charitable objects set out in statute in our Articles of Association, we took on some 2,000 miles of canals and river navigations, and also a number of docks, notably in London, including West India and Millwall docks on the Isle of Dogs. We have some 2,700 listed buildings, 46 scheduled monuments, and 304 conservation areas, which gives you a sort of sense of the scale of the historic estate. In fact, it's the third largest historic estate after the Church of England and the National Trust. And interestingly, the sort of chronological composition of our estate is much tighter, being associated with the Industrial Revolution 250 years ago, and in its most evolved form, the network of waterways formed the mainspring of the Industrial Revolution. And interestingly, today's geography of social and economic deprivation, something which Diana we'll be talking about maps very closely to the sort of urban geography of post-industrial decline. And that makes the Canal and River Trust very well placed to sort of reach into these inner urban areas and to tap into hard to reach community groups. Community engagement and volunteering are obviously core to the mission of heritage advisors within the trust, promoting not only appreciation but also a sense of shared ownership of the waterways heritage. And since I joined the Canal and River Trust as a sort of closet archaeologist, I was always keen to demonstrate the power of the discipline to unlock opportunities for meaningful community engagement, learning, research, and investigation in a social setting. And that social setting is really important. Again, Diana will pick up on that. And the sort of volunteer experience you'll be mentioning. Shortly after the war, LTC, or Tom Rolt, and Robert Fordyce Aikman, the pioneers of inland waterway restoration and preservation, formed the Inland Waterways Association. So the Inland Waterways Association is a much more mature charity than the trust. But they, even in those early days, recognised the potential of the inland waterways as an environment for recreation. And with the demise of canals as a means of transporting freight, particularly following the collapse of the steel industry, and also in regional context, the abandonment of Bacat, which was the sort of port scheme on the River Trent. A lot of that infrastructure that supported freight became redundant, including a lot of the personnel. Now, one specific group of personnel within British Waterways, which found itself out of a job effectively, were block keepers. And it's that activity which this project makes a very specific look into, because at Norwood Bottom Lock in Southall on the Grand Union main line, Grand Union Canal main line, Norwood Bottom Lock had from 1815 a lock cottage where the lock keeper lived from 1815, and that was primarily to enable supervision of the use of the side pond, which was a water conservation measure brought in by the Canal Company. And in the 1960s, that post became redundant, and ultimately the building was disused and abandoned and was vandalised, and British Waterways demolished it in the 1990s. And the Southall Wellbeing Way project, which was a towpath improvement project, incorporated the creation of a community garden on the site of the former cottage, which is still delineated by the remains of its garden wall. And just to cut to the quick, I suggested to my colleague Diana that before we start planning this community garden, we should undertake a community dig. And I was very keen that we engaged an organisation that saw community archaeology at the core of its philosophy and business model. And so we brought in Digventures. And it's at that point which I'll hand over to Diana.
Hi everyone, so I'm Diana. I'm the engagement manager for Canal and River Trust, and what that means is it's my role to engage with but also encourage more diverse communities who live within a kilometre of all our canals to actually use our blue and green spaces for their wellbeing. I think we know there's 1 in 8 people in London don't have access to sort of private green space. So that's just to explain really what my role is. I also need to put my hand up and say, before we did this project, I had never been involved in the dig. I'd never had any interest in digging. And actually when Phil came and said this would be a good project, obviously I was very keen, because we're always keen to do new projects, but I think in the back of my mind, I had a bit of a doubt. Are we really going to engage local people? Are people really going to come out? Are we going to end up with our usual demographic, which in the Canal and River Trust, our volunteers are, the demographic is older white men. Nothing wrong with older white men, but obviously we want to engage with the larger diverse community. So the Southall Wellbeing Way, essentially we got funding from the Mayor of London. So we worked closely with local organisations and Ealing Council. So we had funding for improvements, but also to increase the wellbeing. And again, I think you mentioned it, the sort of 5 principles of wellbeing are connect, be active, take notice, learn and give. And I think Maiya's going to talk a little bit more about sort of how we hit those outcomes. But essentially Southall, for those that don't know it, it's in Ealing. It's one of its more deprived areas. People have sort of less employment, they perhaps have less access to services, less opportunities, less income coming in. And it is a very high South Asian population. So the project's been running for 2 years, and alongside the improvements, we've also been running a lot of different engagement activities, things like community picnics, getting people out walking, getting people out onto the boat trips, canal trips. So when this came along, we worked very closely with Digventures, and the idea was very much that we wanted to recruit local people to do the community dig. It wasn't a case we were going to have a dig and then people from across London were going to come. We really wanted it to be something that local people came, and also that it helped us to go design community gardens. So I've got some, because we haven't got the tech, I've got some pictures, sorry for those of you online, just to pass around. The first thing that I think was really unique.
Sorry, they'll have to come next time.
That's okay. The first thing that's really
That's
unique
nice for
is
you.
that we bought the equipment to the dig site actually by boat. So I think that was quite unique. I'm just passing these around. The other thing that we did, we worked with our current volunteers to actually clear the site, and those volunteers then wanted to come back to the dig. The way we recruited local people was that we had 3 days of digging, but we split it to 6 different sessions because we didn't want just a group of 10 people. We wanted as many people to come. We had a family day, and we also put out local community groups, and also through local schools and through our networks. But we also put it out on social media to try and meet younger people. When we actually had the event, I think I was completely astonished, because it's the only event we've had where everybody who signed up turned up, and more people turned up. We had every age group, every background, every demographic. During the 3 days, we must have spoke to about another 120 people. We had 64 people come in total. We spoke to over 125 people passing by, asking us, what was going on. We also had volunteers who then were talking about the benefits of doing. We had young people who originally said their parents dragged them along. We got to the end of the session, we couldn't get them off. We could not stop them digging because they really had enjoyed it so much. And we did talk to people, and we also asked for feedback. And some of the really interesting feedback we got was not just the learning, they were learning about, what had gone on before in that area, some of the artifacts they found. But actually, I think the biggest comments that we got were how people found it was a very good way to get, because they were head down digging, but actually we had people that came on their own, and then, after 3 hours of digging, their sort of isolation perhaps that they'd felt when they first turned up. Some of the young people had not been talking to each other to start with. By the end, again, they were carrying on chatting. There was social media kind of contacts. And also from it, the biggest thing I think Phil was talking about as well is, I can talk loud if you want. The biggest thing I think that we also saw was how it encouraged people to volunteer. So we had a lot of people who had just come as a one-off, but actually they then signed up to volunteer with us on other projects. And also people signed up and said they wanted to know about other activities and how they could get involved and how they felt more confident about coming down to the canal. And I think the thing for us is that it wasn't just a one-off, because what has happened now is a lot of those people have helped us co-design the community garden, which has actually gone in for planning now. So we're waiting on the, Ealing to agree the planning. And a lot of the people that came on the community dig have said that they will now commit and they want to help maintain and build the garden with us and become more involved in the local community. So I obviously could talk about this forever, but if you don't mind, I'm just going to show you, it's a 40-second video with one of the young people, and then we're going to hand over to Maiya to talk about sort of how it was from their side.
Yeah, again, I think I'm just gonna have to apologize to the two people online who won't be able, Maiya might have seen the video already. You just have to come in person next time. We can't figure out this technical detail.
I've gotten the chance to go to an event or to a project. Thank you. My mom has store it on Instagram. So
Brilliant. And what have you enjoyed about today?
I guess just meeting you and talking about just learning a lot about just archaeology in general, the techniques, the basics.
Brilliant, thank you. Sorry, I don't think that was...
That's fine. We've learned that the microphones don't work with the laptop. So that's a learning from us. So yeah, we'll just keep going straight. And Maiya, let's try this. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. That's brilliant. Go
Oh,
for it.
Amazing. Well, really good job on organising, and thank you so much for making the effort to have me here by Zoom, even though I couldn't be here in person. I really appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this event for a while, and to meeting everyone here, and to talking about this really interesting topic of well-being, because it's, as everyone has said, it's a really, really important one, and actually really at the core of what a lot of us do and what a lot of us strive to do. So I think this is a particularly good place to be. Just as a way to introduce myself quickly before I start to talk a little bit more about the Southall Wellbeing Way project. So Digventures was set up to do archaeology that people can be involved in, and that was about 12 years ago, and I've been with them for 10 of those 12 years. So I've gone with them on the journey from having one crowd-funded project a year to having dozens, to doing all sorts of different projects beyond digs, to working with organisations like the National Trust and their Heart Volunteers, doing online searches for archaeology with LiDAR, to working with organisations like Canal and River Trust to respond to really specific requests that they've got about organising archaeology for their communities. And so I kind of wanted to reflect a little bit, maybe, or to use this time to reflect a little bit on some of the things that we've learned as an organisation, and also me individually over those 10 years of doing archaeology, and to reflect a little bit on how we kind of went about designing the programme for Canal and River Trust and working with them to sort of hit the points that we wanted to talk about, that they wanted to achieve with the dig. So over the 10 years, I've had the really good fortune of working on a huge number of different projects in loads of different parts of the country, with lots of different communities and people from all different parts, and taking part in archaeology either for the first time, having never done it before, or having done lots of it and everything in between. The other thing that I just wanted to note was that as a born and bred Londoner, this Canal and River Trust dig that we did was the first dig that we've done as an organisation in London, and it was absolutely wonderful in its own right to be working with other Londoners and bringing people in London into archaeology. It's been a bit of a personal dream and mission of mine as well. I also just wanted to echo a couple of points that some of the other speakers have said. So there was a lot that really resonated with what Alisdair was saying about kind of the natural ability of what's happening on an archaeological site to give us an opportunity to create a safe and supportive space to do something collectively that also has purpose. There's so much opportunity in the way that archaeology runs to create a sense of teamliness, of connection, and we learned a lot about good wellbeing practice from working on other projects with veterans. So really appreciate the work you do and what you shared with us earlier today. And that is actually, some of that has really affected the way that we do things as well. And likewise, Sadie, when you were talking about the types of well-being and the 5 pillars of it, and the fact that actually as archaeologists, we don't lean into the social side of well-being enough. And I think that is really, really true. Because as I say, as an activity, there's a lot that naturally makes archaeology a really good fit. And I think actually the social and collective aspect of it is so important. And it's one that actually, when we look at the information that we collect from participants, I think around 35% of our participants, when we ask them what they enjoyed about their time taking part in a project, about 35% of them unprompted say that it was the social side of taking part, that it was the camaraderie, the collectiveness, the meeting people, the kindness and supportiveness of the team, and or seeing like their child, their partner, whoever they're with taking part, and the sense that they've just been allowed and that they're trusted to take part. So I think, as everyone else has mentioned, actually that social side is really important and is something that we should be leaning into in how we view what we're doing and how we're communicating it to people. But I think other aspects that are really important to think about that archaeology can provide for wellbeing is the structure, and I'm sure Alisdair knows a lot about this, is that the fact that there is a defined process with clear goals and can give people a sense of progress and achievement in working towards them and then achieving it at the end of the day, like it really helps with a sense of satisfaction, with your sort of sense of self-esteem and self-worth and your contribution. Then you've got the fact that you're learning, it's often quite question-led, there's a sense of discovery, it can be quite playful. And then, you know, there's a sense of contribution as well. You've got a goal, you've got a group of people who are coming together and you're getting to make a difference. You're actually making a difference to something and achieving something together. And then on top of that, it's something that's hands-on, it's outdoors, it's physical, it's active, it's multi-sensory, it's healthy. It's all there. We're really, really lucky in that we've got a lot of these elements there, and it's really about making the most of them. And just touching a little bit on what Diana was saying, that actually the way that we put our programme together and the way that we really try to reach out into the local community and bring people in was a whole process in itself. And there's a lot of work that you need to do to achieve those kind of results. From our point of view, we ended up with, on this project, 80 to 90% of people who had either never done archaeology before in any way, shape or form, or had never been involved with the Canal and River Trust before, which, yeah, was a really good thing that we felt like we'd achieved together. So if we're going to have a little bit of a reflection on how did we do that? How did we get all of these people to come along to something that a lot of people think, oh, they won't be interested in, people won't be interested in? Well, actually, I think there's a few ingredients to think about when programming archaeology into a wellbeing project. And the first I'd like to shout out is partnership. So having a partner like Canal and River Trust who really do have a genuine desire for people to be involved, to come into their community, to be part of what they're doing, is invaluable. To be working with people who are coming at things from the same place as you is just absolutely priceless, and seeing the people that you're trying to reach as being at the heart of what you're doing and not just as an add-on, that you're not just trying to get people into a thing that you've decided to do, that it's actually for their benefit. That is the foundation of a really good wellbeing project. The next ingredient I'd say is really worth thinking about is actually your design process for the program. So it's not good practice, I'd say, to kind of have a program in mind and then just do it and then try to get the people into it. The thing that will make it work is thinking about who the people are, the wellbeing outcomes you want for them, and what they need and want in order to take part and to be part of it. To think about all of that at the start of the process of designing your program and not at the end, which is often what happens. People design a program and then they're like, oh, how do we get people to come and do the advertising and get people along? And I think Sadie was touching on that a bit as well, that actually understanding the communities you're working with and what they need and want and asking them, again, is really foundational to having a successful project. So on this particular project, you know, the program could have ended up looking really different in lots of different ways. And a lot of the things that we had to think about involved the kind of staffing and support that we needed to bring into this for the communities and age groups that we were working with. Thinking about which age groups we wanted to work with in the first place. So we knew that we wanted to work with young people and young families in the local area. And that in itself governs a lot of what you're going to be doing on site. Thinking about the age groups, mobility of people, demographics and socio-cultural factors, especially around people feeling like, oh, they're not suitable to take part, or you won't really want me to take part, I don't really feel comfortable, this isn't usually the kind of thing I do. There's quite a lot of work that goes into overcoming that kind of anxiety and getting people to feel comfortable that this really is something for them, and you are welcome here and you will have a good time when you come. So all of that kind of affected how we designed the sessions, the number of places, the length of things, the pace of how we're teaching people and what we're saying to people while they're there, how we're choosing what activities they're actually going to be doing in the time that they're there to make sure that they're doing something that is going to be rewarding, and making sure that there are options for people who don't feel comfortable committing right from the start. So either the option to just come and look, to come and just do finds, or to just get involved in drawing, or just in having a chat with people who are getting involved. And as I say, I probably said this about, I don't know how many times now, but the social aspect is really, really important, and leaning into that makes a really big difference. But also, as I said, the sense of contribution. So we were very clear in saying to people that by taking part, you're being part of something and you're contributing to it. And actually the result of what you do is going to go into creating a community garden, inform the design of something that people in the area have asked for, and you can be part of that by taking part. I think another really crucial ingredient for good wellbeing projects is actually the way that you spread the word, the language and imagery that you use, even going down into little things like the actual sign-up process and how complicated that is, how you're promoting it, and what you're saying to people about the experience on offer. So it's sort of very easy as kind of technical archaeologists to think about, you know, the science and the archaeology side of it. But, you know, if we take a step back and just think about what people who have never done archaeology before for the first time are seeing in it, and how excited people are when you invite them to do something that, you know, they've only seen in movies or on the telly, and making that opportunity open to people is really powerful, and looking at it from that point of view. So yeah, being clear in your language around that as well, and making sure that you're removing as many barriers in that language to entry as well is pretty important too. You've then also got the kind of actually what you do when people arrive. So making sure that when people have signed up and they turn up, and the kind of experience that you're actually designing for them and giving them. And again, that's really about making sure that at all times you're thinking about the people at the heart of your process. They're not here to help you do archaeology. They are, yeah, they are, but also you're there to give them an experience and to listen to them, to be there for them, to welcome them from the moment they arrive, to make them feel part of a group, to make them feel that they're part of a collective for the time that they're there, and they're doing something together, that you value their time and their contribution, that their contributions are going to make a difference and they're going to be able to see the result of it, and that you're taking an interest in them. I mean, I always find that when I'm on community digs, half of what I'm doing is just asking people about their life and hearing their story and talking, and why they joined, what they want to know, what they can tell you about the site that you're digging, that they've spent their life walking past every day, and, you know, have loads of stories that they can tell you. And all of this sort of comes together into this kind of quite a collective spirit that does generate a sense of happiness, of curiosity, of satisfaction, of self-esteem and making a difference. But you also, in that practice, you have to be quite alert to I guess people's sensitivities around those things as well, giving people lots of encouragement and making them feel part of it. And then I think finally the last thing I'd say, if you're programming archaeology into a wellbeing project, is what happens afterwards. So Diana talked about the fact that, you know, it's bringing volunteers into something much more long-term. You're not just picking them up and then dropping them. You're showing the results of what they've done with them afterwards, keeping them in touch, remembering that from their point of view, what they've just done is an experience they'll remember forever. And will be something that they can continue to do as well. So yeah, those were my thoughts and reflections on what we did together. And I think it's been really nice to hear about it from everyone else's point of view as well today. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Maiya. That's brilliant. Right, I'm not sure how my maths worked out, but it's getting very close to 7:30. But I'm keen to get to some discussion regardless, because that was really what this whole evening was set up for. So I'm not going to hog the questioning. I think it's important to get to that. We have so many amazing minds in this small but highly qualified audience that I'm just going to say a couple of things that struck me that might start off some things. I think going right back to the beginning, Alisdair, just us saying we don't know why it works, but it works. And I think that's really interesting, because it has really relevance to a lot of what you guys are talking about in terms of measurability and how do we grasp why it works, but also able to quantify that in ways that we can express to other people. Because I think we know it works. We don't necessarily know why it works, but we know that it works. So how do we share that with people outside of our field, to whom are making decisions, to whom are making policy, to whom are spending the money? How do we start to bridge that gap? And any of the speakers can jump in on that.
Well, we do try and measure that it works. Okay, so we do try and measure by questionnaires and seeing how people progress from when they start the program with Watero Uncovered and when they finish after a 12-month period, and then we support them for another 12-month period. So it's very important for us to collect data to prove that it does work. Why it works, I think your last speaker gave some of the reasons why it works, working in a team, getting people to work together on something where they can see it an achievement. All of those reasons that she gave is why it works, but we have to prove to the skeptics, if you like, that it does work. And it's worth investing in, not just for military veterans, but for all kinds of people, disenfranchised people, people who, for no fault of their own, maybe through disabilities or what economic position or whatever, are excluded. And archaeology can be used as a vehicle, and we can prove that it works.
Yeah, but to push that, I think, because a lot of these topics, I mean, there's an emphasis on local, being part of the local community, perhaps in the veteran sense, being part of the veteran community, specifically on Waterloo. Would that, for example, would that excavation process with Waterloo Uncovered work well just with any archaeological site, or does it have to be Waterloo? Does the local project, does it have to be local to get as much benefit out of it? And similarly, do digital resources, digital things, can any of that be used to fill the gaps where we don't have, a project for the local community necessarily to engage with? Is there something else they could do? Probably a very big question, but
Well, I think it can. I mean, as you said, there's more to archaeology than just doing field work. So there's lots of new skills involved in archaeology that we learned that during lockdown, where we were doing a lot of work where we couldn't, physically go anywhere. I put that to the panel, what they think on that.
I think the thing is, and I think everyone's touched on this, that the 5 wellbeing principles are agreed, they're kind of approved, they're up there, and if you think about all of with your group, it's obviously people have a connection, perhaps what's gone in the past. With our people that came, there's a connection because they live locally, but that doesn't mean they will only connect locally. But if you think about the 5 principles, it's connect, be active, take notice, learn and give. In every kind of archaeological dig, you are going to get that. because there will be a connection, even if it's just that short-term connection whilst people are chatting about their life experience as they're doing that dig. So I think we've already gone half the way. The principles have been set and they are recognised nationally, the principles, and they're recognised by the sort of health authorities and the powers that be. So I think it's taking those 5 and then just seeing how your individual project fits in. Like we ask children, for example, really basic questions. How did you feel at the start of an activity? How do you feel now? And generally you'll see that wherever people were, they'd feel much better for being connected, being active, taking notice, learning something, and sort of giving back as well.
And just to add, the NHS use a metrics framework called Wellbeing Adjusted Life Years, which is a bit like quality adjusted life years, which is how they decide who gets cancer treatment and who doesn't. And wellbees are increasingly used to determine things like funding on wellbeing projects, that kind of thing in the NHS. And that's the kind of metric that what Al's talking about and what Canal River Trust is talking about can absolutely respond to. If we fit our results to their metrics, then there's a whole other area of funding that opens up to archaeological projects and that kind of thing. So there's a real trick that we're missing by not quite matching our data up with the data that they need.
I was going to say, because I think there's been papers on being in public benefit and archaeology. Of course there have, and I think one of the most comprehensive ones looked at 180 different measures of how to measure it. So it's about consistency, perhaps, of figuring out which metrics we can use most effectively, more consistently, so that we can map things up and really push them, perhaps. Is there anybody in the audience that would, yes, Catherine?
Hello. It's kind of a practical question, but I think the challenge is often with these projects is how you get your audience involved in the first place. How do you find how to reach people or get a diverse audience? Have you got any top tips? I mean, some of you touched on that, but how do you get anyone involved? And is it, like Chris was saying at the beginning almost of this group, is it open to anyone, or do you only want people who need the sort of a well-being point of view? Because and also coming from that, from my own perspective, there's a well-being element to life and to living and just being a human being, that is important as well. So that got a bit broad, but it's just like getting people to get engaged and from different backgrounds.
Yeah, I think as well, just similarly just to touch on your question, perhaps to maybe focus it, might make more broad, who knows. The hard to reach natures, I think, is a project more effective if you're kind of focus it on one target area, and really kind of try and get that group out, because we're aware that there's a sort of selecting population that engages with heritage more broadly. Perhaps, Duncan, you're finding this particularly, that there might be a population that the Heritage Action Rangers gets more easily. How do you combat that and kind of get more groups involved than,
it's a real challenge. I mean, there's the challenge of geography. And I'm sure you all know most National Trust properties are in far-flung corners of the country, and what are big countryside estates, especially where the bulk of the really important archaeology is in deepest, darkest Dorset or your deepest, darkest Devon, and these places, the communities tend to be relatively small. They tend to be relatively scattered, and they tend to be from what you might call the traditional spectrum of audiences, and that's a real challenge. And I think that one of the ways the National Trust is going about that is first of all diversifying its natural audience. So it's trying to diversify the types and range of people who are coming to the National Trust places. If you can get that, then you can start thinking about, okay, how do we start to get some of these people engaged in helping and supporting us more actively, rather than just turning up and having a Sunday afternoon and having a picnic in the park. So yeah, it is a challenge. It's certainly something we're aware of and conscious of, because you're absolutely right. You know, the vast bulk of the National Trust volunteers come from that traditional sector that we know of, you know, like standing in rooms and telling you off on the wrong chair, you know. So it's absolutely a challenge. I don't think it's one that we've bottomed yet.
Mm. Does anybody, Maiya, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there was just a couple of points that I wanted to follow up on. So one was a question around, like, does a project need to be focused on one particular group at a time in order to get them out? Or, you know, can bringing people in from different areas and different groups for a project also be something that's valuable? And maybe in a really unhelpful way, I'm going to say both are really true. So in some cases, the audiences or the communities that you're working with, you do need the amount of time and the resource and the effort and the amount of planning and research to really think about what you need to do in order to get to those people and design your project in a way that means it's accessible to them and is something that they want and will benefit from. And that might, in some cases, that might take so much effort that you should really only be focusing on that group and doing it for them because their needs are specific. But in lots of other cases, actually, having people from different regions or different areas or different connections to the place or none at all can also be extraordinarily amazing in the results that it produces.